So the first item of accountability here, Corey, you wanted to carry over from last time, and that was talk to me about accountability for a book, right? This is for the book writing we're going to be doing
Yes.
in November. Okay.
Yes. Which November is tomorrow, Mike. So if we
As we
had,
record this,
yeah, as we record
yeah.
this. So if we had time, I would do it right now because then I could be assured that it would check off the list. But we don't have time right now. So I'm going to have to try to schedule this with you either today or tomorrow because if we're going to start writing a book tomorrow, according to this recording, then I need to do this soon. So
You do.
I failed. 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 I'm writing it down right now. Talk to Mike.
I'm sorry. I am for sure doing this. This has come up several times in the last week with different people. And every time I've felt very uncomfortable telling them I'm writing a book next month. But yeah, there's like a dozen people now who know I'm committed to this. In fact, in the car, we recently took a trip to Tennessee, went to the Pinball Museum. Pro show listeners just heard us talk about my experience there, but long car ride. On the way there, I outlined the different sections of the book. It's going to be roughly a productivity book. I mean, it's going to be on
Nice.
personal retreats. So I'll give you a guess how many sections there are.
3.
Ding, 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 ding.
That's how you know.
I was trying not to, but that's just kind of how it broke down when I was working on the outline. I got the mind map outline. That's the TLDR here. The outline is ready to go, or mind map is ready to go. I've written a whole bunch of words for a video that I published on personal retreats. So that was like 8,000 words. And that's going to be, I mean, all of that is stuff that I can use in the book. But yeah, tomorrow is go time.
Yeah.
I don't have a set amount of like, I want to write 1,000 words a day or anything like that.
Okay.
I'm just going to try to write every day for the book.
And that was my next question to you. I just hadn't made it there yet. Is what's your plan? Do you mind telling us your plan? Is there a set time that you're going to write? Is you already said you don't have a set number of words that you want to write? Like what's the structure of this? Because if you're like me and you don't put a structure to it, then you're going to last a day or two and then it's just going to fizzle out and do something else. So what's your structure?
Yeah. Well, I don't know 100%. I mean, the structure is really I time block my days, and writing the book is going to be one of the 3 things that is going to be in the time block plan every single day. And I'm going to try to block off at least an hour. And I think some days I'll be able to do more than that. Some days that'll be a stretch. But the thing is, I want to make sure that I write every single day. Joshua is also going to be writing. He wants to work on I don't think it's not like a novel, but like a fiction work that he's been working on. So we talked about creating like a big chart and hanging it in the kitchen where we can,
Nice.
The dots, go up as you have the number of words that you've written every day. But yeah, it starts tomorrow. We don't have that yet, so we'll see.
Hey, there's always tonight and there's always tomorrow morning, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you're gonna push forward with it. Not to take too long on this tangent, did you know that NaNoWriMo is not happening in 2025?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
No,
so-
I didn't know that.
So, listener, if you don't know what NaNoWriMo is, it's National Novel Writing Month, and it's usually the month of November, and it's for primarily like science fiction and fantasy. Like, isn't that where it got
It's
started?
National Novel Writing Month.
Yeah, yeah. So, the organization shut down in April of 2025 due to financial issues. So now all the now all the NaNoWriMo stuff is going to be like bootleg. I'm sure somebody on Reddit has started a let's do this without the organization kind of a thing. So, but I just did a quick Google search of it. I was going to link to it, and it's no more.
That's sad.
It is sad. But now you're going to do your own. You're going to do your own.
Yep.
Mike Schmidt National Productivity Book Writing Month.
Well, I'm going to write, and I am going to share what I'm doing inside of the library, my community.
Nice.
So we can do additional accountability if you would like, but that there's going to be some public accountability just to make sure that I stick with this.
Good.
But I am confident that I am going to be able to not necessarily write the whole thing in 30 days, but write every day. Uh, the personal retreat planner, not to go too deep on this, but I've been using that and it's working really well. I actually got a unprompted testimonial from somebody the other day, the first one, which is pretty great, talking about how they've been trying personal retreats for many months and they haven't gotten it to stick. And this was the first time that it really had any sort of traction.
It's awesome.
I'm experiencing that, well, not the first time it's had any traction, but I've definitely seen the traction that comes from using it too. So aligning my quarterly plan of writing this book with the daily plans and blocking out the time for it, that's really the key. You don't need my planner in order to do that, but that's what I'm using. And so I have never felt more confident in my plan for accomplishing something than I do right now.
That's good. That's good. I like to hear that.
But again, it's the process. It's not the outcome that I'm really tracking here. So
cool. What else? So what else is on our follow-up list?
Well, I've got several follow-up things that I failed at, defining my STP, creating checklists for everything. I still intend to create the checklists. To be honest, I don't remember what STP was at this point. Normally, folks, I go back and I even re-listen to the part of the episode where we talk about the action items, so I know exactly what I was thinking when we get to this part of the show. But as Cory alluded to, it has been a week. So I did not get a chance to do that this time. I'm just going to take the loss on this one and turn the page.
And I fully support that. I fully support that.
All right. And then you had a couple for downloading the resources from the previous book, which was Sponsor Magnet by Justin Moore. Well, actually, let's just talk about that one first. Did you get a chance to do that?
I didn't remember that I was going to do this. I need to do this. But no, I bombed on that one. I can move quickly on to my second one, so I don't feel too bad about that one. So grow the audience or take the first step in this. I think where I'm at, Mike, and I keep circling back on this. So you've probably picked up as, I don't know where I want to put the majority of my time right now. Like I have like 3 or 4 different things that check slightly different boxes, but they're all around, that same like true north or that same life theme, like as you would, describe it. So like they're all in that space and they're all good. I just don't know which one to actually commit the effort to right now. And I keep going back and forth on them. And it's like one of those situations where like I'll be on Monday, like super confident, like, yeah, this is like, I should do this, right? This is the one. Then on Wednesday, I'm like, maybe I should do this one, right? So like I haven't made like a boatload of progress on any of them because I'm not positive on which one makes the most sense. And I need to figure that out. Like that's a big thing. So grow the audience. Like I've thought about that. The other thing I come back to a lot, and you and I've talked about this in different ways, in different forms. I know like social media is necessary, and I think social media is a part of the way that you grow an audience. And I know that we've read some books on growing your newsletter as opposed to growing like a social media audience, that there's more value in that. I just can't stand social media. Like I just can't stand it. And it's because I think like of what it does to me internally. Like when I start to play around with it, I just think differently, and I don't like the way I think when social media is very active. So that's been a hard thing for me to figure out. I was like, how do I grow my audience but not like go crazy on social media? And I haven't figured that out either. So I mean, I'll stop there.
Well, let me break the bad news to you that you are live on social media right now as we stream this to YouTube.
I know. And like that doesn't bother me as much because like I'm not super engaged in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where like, do I care that if people watch the live stream? Sure. Do I care if they watch the video afterwards? Yeah. But it doesn't like creep into my brain and like start to mess with me. For some reason, if I do a post on Instagram or X or whatever it is, like I want that to go viral. And I don't like that about me. Like I'm saying this very strongly. Like I don't like that about me. Or I want my follower count to go up. It's a pride thing. It's got to be a pride thing, right? Like I want my follower count to go up. I look at yours and I'm like, Mike has more followers than me. And I'm like, yeah, but he's been doing this for like 20 years, right? And like, But my thing is like that bothers me, and I don't like that it bothers me,
Yeah.
and so I want to like retreat and just completely go away from it.
You should be in my Creator Business Accelerator, sir.
And I told you that I was super close, and I just
Yeah.
didn't pull the trigger.
Yeah. So just real briefly, I think that maybe this isn't news to you, but just for the sake of everybody else who's hearing what you're saying and saying, yeah, I agree. I think the way to beat this is to pick one platform where you actually want to show up. Don't view it as social media, and don't be like, well, I got to show up on all the socials. Just go where your people are, join the conversation, start talking, and then you can build the audience, and eventually you have something that you're gonna sell. My audience is YouTube. I almost never go on YouTube just to chat or comment, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
About once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, I'll actually just go in and batch reply to all those comments.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be a little bit more responsive right after I launch a video, but for the most part, that's you don't have to play the game the way that everybody else plays it either. You can do it on your own terms. So really, it's just thinking about what am I trying to get out of this.
I know I don't have to, but my brain can't not. Like you know, like,
That's fair.
and that's my
That's fair.
problem. Like so, and I know that about me, but that's the whole thing. That just driving me crazy about this growing the audience thing is which project, which ties back to the the other idea, and then how do I push forward with that? But I'll work on that. I'll figure that out. It's going to be
you've got a couple months to figure it out before you go to the sponsor games. That's your last
okay. And the last one is the sponsor games, which I just told Mike, I think before we turned everything on, I'm like 90% in on sponsor games. I have to confirm a couple more things, which will probably get done this weekend, but I'm about 90% in on the sponsor games. So Justin Moore, you did a great job convincing me to do a thing. And then Mike helped you out convincing me to do a thing. So there's a real good chance that we're going to be in Dallas in March, you and I. So
San Antonio.
Is that where? San Antonio. Sorry.
Don't go to Dallas. You won't find me there.
Sorry. There's a real good chance we're going to be in San Antonio come March. All right, that's my last one. That's my last follow-up item.
Cool. Yeah, that looks like a really cool conference, and I'm hoping that my Black Friday sale goes bonkers, so I don't have to worry about spending the money to fly for this thing. And the stupid thing, it's not stupid, but like if there was one conference you were going to go to where you literally could justify the expense, it would be one that's going to help you make money through sponsorships.
Exactly.
Right?
That's the same thing that goes through my brain. Is my brain is like, Cory, this like probably has the highest potential ROI out of anything you could ever do. Like you should do this, right? Like, you should really do this. So yeah. Like what you're hearing here, audience, is you're hearing the difference between somebody who's a full-time creator and then somebody who does this because, it's like the side thing and like it borderlines hobby versus creator kind of thing. And like you think about it in different ways. You really do.
It's true.
All right. Alrighty.
Although I think we need to destroy that, I was going to say stereotype, but really it's like a mental model limiting belief there at some point.
We should.
Because a lot of the quote unquote full-time creators that I've looked up to over the years, they started as full-time other job, and then this was a side hustle. They just didn't frame it that way. They're like, yeah, I'm Max Sparky. I'm also a lawyer, but I'm totally this thing. Like, that's what we got to get you to.
I know. Keep working on it, Mike. Keep working on me.
All right.
I'm a work in progress, Mike.
We all are. Okay, let's talk about today's book, which is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. This was a listener recommendation from Andrew, I believe. So thank you for recommending this one. I had read previous Chip and Dan Heath books, and so I kind of knew what to expect with this. This one did not disappoint. What I love about the Chip and Dan Heath books is that the structure of the book is very simple. So this one has an introduction, which is what sticks, ? So asking the question. And then chapter 1 is simple. Chapter 2 is unexpected. Chapter 3 is concrete. Chapter 4 is credible. Chapter 5 is emotional. Chapter 6 is stories. And then there's an epilogue. what sticks minus the question mark. So it's a statement. There's no three parts to this. There's one core idea they are talking about. It's very clear from the subtitle why some ideas survive and others die. And it's an interesting combination of expertise that they bring as co-authors. I forget which one it was. I think it was Chip, who teaches a class at Stanford.
Yeah, I can't remember. One of them does teach at Stanford. I just can't remember which one it is.
Yeah, and the class is called Made to Stick, which is like based on the ideas in this book. That's kind of cool.
What's wild is I've actually seen this happen with more than one person at Stanford, where they'll teach a class and they'll teach it a couple different times, and then they'll turn it into a book. Like they basically just take their course notes and they make them a little bit more robust, and they'll turn it into a book, which I think is a really kind of clever way to do that. It also comes from, and I won't go down too far down this rabbit hole, it comes from the culture of a place like Stanford, where they essentially have more money than they ever know what to do with. So they encourage they encourage their faculty members to do stuff like this. Like they give them time to like help and like, you know, they give them free time to go like turn that class into a book. So it's an interesting model for a university.
Yeah, that is true, and I do think that is cool. However, that's only half of this, because that's one person's perspective, and then I forget how the pieces fit together. But the bottom line is that it reads different than, because we've read some of those books, I believe, that have come out of Stanford classes. I forget which ones, but it's maybe the most successful, or the best, in my opinion, co-authored book I've read. Like, I generally don't like co-authored books because there's a very distinct handoff from this person wrote this section to this person wrote this section, and it feels a little bit disjointed. You don't get that with Chip and Dan Heath. They were made to write books together.
Well, and I thought that's the exact same thing, right? As you said that, I thought this did not read like a co-authored book. They would refer to the person who, if they were like talking more specifically about somebody than somebody else, they would do that, but it wasn't like inappropriate. Like, now Dan's going to talk about blah, 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 blah. And like, you didn't have to like play that mental game of switch. It was just them telling a story, and they'd be like, in Chip's classes or in Dan's experience. And like, it worked really well. I think they did it really well.
Yep. All right. So, ready to get into the content?
Yep. Ready to get into the framework, because that's where they start us with a framework.
That's true. So the first section is technically the introduction, where they're asking the question, what sticks? And they define sticky as getting your ideas understood and remembered. I believe it's this section where they start off with a very
yes,
disruptive,
dramatic,
that's the word.
Yeah.
Yes, story about the kidney bandit.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And apparently this is a thing that like people have told different versions of this story throughout the years, and I had never heard this before. Had you heard this?
I'd never heard it, but I will tell you, they had me hooked. Like, so hooked in the first, however many lines. Like, they had me hooked.
Yeah. So the version of this is, guy meets this girl at the bar. She gets him a drink. He gets knocked out, wakes up in the bathtub. There's a tube out of his side, and his kidney has been harvested.
I was just like, oh my gosh, there's no way. Like, this is crazy. This is a crazy story. And then they drop the reveal.
Yep. Which is kind of the point.
Yep.
Is they want to show that certain ideas and certain stories tend to stick with you, and others don't. They also mentioned at the beginning here that most communication advice focuses on the delivery and on the presentation, which I have been through Toastmasters and done stuff like that. So I obviously there's not no value in that, but kind of their whole argument right from the beginning here is sort of a hot take, because they're like, the idea is really the thing that matters, not how well you can present it. They have the framework that you mentioned, which is that sticky ideas draw from a common set of traits, which are the next 6 chapters. So simplicity, unexpectedness, concreteness, credibility, emotions, and story. And there's a lot here with this, like stories specifically. I think of Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. So there are whole books that have been written just on the ability to tell a story. You can definitely go deeper than what they share in these 250 pages roughly. But I also think that the length of this is pretty decent. They do a good job going into each chapter, explaining not only the core ideas and sharing different stories and statistics to support those ideas, but they've also got, as you go through the chapters, the gray boxes. I forget what they're called, but it's basically like they show you two different messages, and then they run through the checklist and they say this one is better than that one because of this, and you can see how it checks these criteria, that sort of thing.
They called them clinics, is what they called them.
Clinics.
Yeah, clinics. Okay. I liked the framework. I thought the framework was easy. Success is how they break it down. So it's just got one less S. So they add like a little lowercase s on the end of it. The other thing that stood out to me in this chapter that I've heard before, but they put it in an interesting context, was this idea of the curse of knowledge. That basically once we know about something, it's hard for us to imagine that somebody else doesn't know that. And I experience this every day or every semester with what I teach. Like, so right now I'm teaching statistics, and like one of the things is like, how on earth could you not know that the area under the curve is the probability kind of a thing? And I forget that, like, for a lot of these students, this is the first time they've ever experienced that concept in their life. So like, I really like how they drive home this idea of the curse of knowledge, and then they carry that throughout the rest of the book is, oh, you're noticing here one of the curses of knowledge, you know, where people aren't paying attention to that.
Yeah, the definition for the curse of knowledge, by the way, is when we forget what it was like not to know something. So I have definitely heard this term before, been aware of it with just the stuff that I've done online over the last several years. I probably still have fallen into this at different times, but I've tried real hard to make things that are approachable for anybody on the spectrum as it pertains to, you know, in my specific case right now, how familiar they are with Obsidian. You know, I'm working on a video right now, which is like 20 quality of life tips. And so there's some stuff on there that's really basic, some stuff on there that's pretty advanced. And I'm trying to, you know, make it so that whoever is going to give me the time to watch the video is going to get something from it. Before that, it was productivity. I think that one, it's easier for me to fall into the curse of knowledge. It's like, oh yeah, everybody time blocks, right? It's obviously, it's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's not the case.
That's not the case. Yeah.
Yeah. But the larger point that they're really making at the end of this, which I think is important and relevant for the rest of the book, is that creating sticky ideas is something that can be learned. And so that's what they're going to try to teach us over the next 6 chapters.
Yeah, I think just before we move on to chapter 1, because we're going to start to talk about like each of the key ideas in their framework. So we're going to start with simple. Before we move on to that, the idea of creating sticky stories or sticky ideas was really, really attractive to me. So in this first introduction, you know, I come out of this thinking this is relevant, this is valuable no matter what you do. So I don't care, like they'll use a lot of like advertising examples because they're trying to get this idea to stick in your head. That way when you go to the store, you remember to buy the thing or you remember to look it up. They'll use those examples. But like for me, like teaching, like I think about this a lot. Like I want these ideas to stick in people's brains, not because I want them to get an A on the exam, but because I'm teaching them something that's going to be valuable in their life. And the better it sticks, the more they're likely to remember it, or at least to remember where to go look things up and like figure it out later on in life. So like this really connected with me because I use this every day. Like I will use this every day. Then I think about it from my family standpoint, right? Like there are things that I want to have stick in the boys' minds as they grow up, you know, that way they remember those truths, right? Or they remember those good practices or whatever it is. So like this hit me really well on 2 different levels, and it had nothing to do with like advertising or any of that other stuff. It just had to do with like life and skills. So for those of you out there thinking like, you know, these guys, and do I really care about business development or anything? It's like, don't worry about that. Like I think these principles go across a lot of different domains. And if you want to have an influence in other people's life, there's a lot of good practical tips that they give you in here that will help you have an influence in somebody else's life. So I want to throw that out there for the people who are a little bit skeptical about whether or not to read this book.
Absolutely read it. That's the short version.
Yeah.
Let's go into chapter 1 because there's something here that complements exactly what you were talking about. And I thought of you when I read this. So, chapter 1 is simple, but one of the points that he makes here, and this isn't one of the core points, but I want to jump here because you were just talking about this. Good teachers intuitively use lots of schemas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, schemas are kind of these frameworks, I guess, like mental models
Mental
that people
models.
already understand. And then they use that to explain new things. So this whole chapter is on making things simple. They define simple as core plus compact. And by the way, at the end of this book, after the epilogue, there is a Making Ideas Stick the Easy reference guide. And I love this. I have this open as we talk through things because I want to make sure that the way they presented this stuff, there was very clear progression to the things. That's not the way my notes read necessarily because I'm just jotting down whatever stands out to me.
Yep.
So there are two things here under the simple section. There is find the core and share the core, right? So this is the first item on the checklist. If you really want to make something sticky, you've got to make it simple. And a couple of examples that I liked from here, they talk about core ideas for a couple of brands like Southwest, the low fare airline, and how that can be clarifying in terms of what decisions to make. Because if you are the low fare airline, then the example they use is someone in marketing has the idea because people want to eat something on their plane, we should offer, chicken salad to people because that's what they want. And then the clarifying question is, does serving people chicken salad on the flight make us the low fare airline? Well, no, obviously not. You have to spend more money to do that.
Yep.
Okay, we're not going to do that. So I love like just the clarification that comes from knowing what the core idea is for your brand in that specific scenario. But they also talk about commander's intent in this chapter, which I think is pretty cool. Commander's intent comes from the Army, but the idea here is that whenever you have a plan, it never survives contact with the enemy. The enemy gets a vote, is kind of how they introduce it at the beginning here. So when you are establishing commander's intent, really like what is the mission about? What are we trying to do here? When you understand that, then you can modify the plan as you encounter resistance, which applies to everybody every single day, not just those in the armed forces. So 2 questions for establishing commander's intent they share, which I think are great. If we do nothing else during tomorrow's mission, we must, and then fill in the blank. And then the second one is the single most important thing that we must do tomorrow is, and then fill in the blank. If you did that, imagine how much more productive you would be.
Yep. I mean, I love commander's intent because what it does is it gives you the structure that you need, but it doesn't tell you everything that you have to do or like every required item in that thing. So like this is who we are, this is what we do, and then go do your thing. And like part of the thing that gets me, so I do, some management type thinking and teaching around like project management and those things. And like part of the thing that drives me crazy is when we over manage or we micromanage people, because like the best way things run oftentimes is I'm going to hire you because you're an expert and because you're smart. And then I don't want to micromanage you. I want to tell you the intent, and then I want you to go do really good things. And part of the reason why is because you might do something better than I think, like better, like wiser than me, because I hired you and you're smart in that domain. So I love the idea of commander's intent because it accounts for that. It doesn't like tell you exactly what you need to do step by step, and then you just become like a drone following the guideline. It like gives you the ability to excel in that. It can go wrong, right? Because if you have somebody that's lazy or incompetent or whatever it might be, they're not interpreting your intent the right way or whatever it is. But I love that principle. I think the other one you had brought it up at the very, very first part is schemas. And I had colleagues and peers in grad school that would study schemas around different ideas or different concepts, particularly like, as they relate to like something like physics, right? Like what are the schemas or what is the background information that we would need in order to advance to the next concept in schemas. And schemas will be tied in to like an idea called threshold concepts, right? Like, okay, well, I need to develop the schema. You can think about it as like a scaffolding, like the pre information that I have that then allows me to build on top and then get that next concept and understand that next concept. So it's like what they're doing here, I guess what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way, there's a lot of credibility in the idea of what they're developing here, and they're basing it on, I think, some really legitimate like science and some really legitimate ideas, and I just really like that.
Agreed. I think this is a fantastic beginning to the book. Anything else from chapter 1, or you want to go to chapter 2?
Yeah, they if you need a good example of this, of like what they give a good example towards the end of the chapter where they talk about like proverbs, like a bird in the hand, kind of a situation, or like the golden rule, or those type of things. This is an example of what they're talking about when they say like it needs to be like the core message and it needs to be compact, or what were the two things for simple, Mike? I'm forgetting them. Oh, core and compact, right? So it needs to be this core idea. Yeah. It needs to be compact. When they say like proverbs, just ones that you can think of off the top of your head, like these are the things that are core and compact, and that's why they stick in your brain so well. So I think they give a really good example when they talk about proverbs there. Okay, I'm ready to go.
They talk about proverbs as sound bites that are profound.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So chapter 2 then is unexpected. And the core ideas here are to get attention, which is the element of surprise, and then hold attention, which is getting people to be interested. And I feel like this one, maybe out of all the chapters, is trying to do the most in terms of communicating ideas.
Okay.
Just because, I don't know, it almost feels like those two things, I get how they're connected, get attention versus hold attention, but those feel like they almost could be their own chapters.
Yeah.
They're two steps in a process. They're not two sides of a coin necessarily.
So let me say this now. I was going to hold off until the end when we talk about style and rating. If there is, I shouldn't say it's the major rub. Like if one of my rubs in this book is the fact that they could have actually broken the chapters down into more chapters that hit tighter points. I get why they didn't. Like, it makes sense why they didn't, so I'm not knocking them for that. But, like, I agree. This chapter, like, if you'd have broken it into those two sections, it would have fit better in my brain. So, like, that's an area where I would, knock them a little bit, I guess, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm struggling because on the one hand, I feel like I agree with you. It should be two separate sections. On the other hand, though, they do fit together, and I feel like it's a clean way of combining them to define this as unexpected.
Yeah.
I just have a little bit of trouble figuring out where I want to go first with this. Surprise gets our attention, interest keeps it, they talk about. So that, is a great way of tying these things together. The most basic way to get someone's attention is to break a pattern. But you do need it to be interesting as well, because they mentioned that when something is surprising but not interesting, it ends up being frustrating. So if you want your ideas to be sticky, they say you need to break someone's guessing machine and then fix it.
Mm-hmm. And they describe this in there. There's a quote in there. I can't remember who the quote's from, but they say, the aha experience is much more satisfying when it's preceded by the experience, right? And it's like, I really like the way of thinking like that. You tell me a story and I go, I wonder like, and if you can get that, you've done exactly what you want to do. This ties directly back to something they say earlier, which I was worried about when they started this chapter. I was like, oh, it's going to be so gimmicky, right? This like just gimmicky surprise, but they directly counter that, and they tell you ways to avoid the gimmicky. And I really like what they do with this like, and then like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think of that. So I like the way they pitch that.
Yeah. And just for clarification, what Cory said was that the aha comes after the
Mm-hmm.
So precedes, not proceeds.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no, they sound the same when you're talking fast, but I think the order here is very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where people maybe are just trying to create those aha moments. I feel like I've maybe been thinking that way in terms of things that I've made previously. And so not necessarily an action item, but the big takeaway from this is you got to open the loop first. You got to get people to ask the question before you can have the big reveal. Otherwise it's kind of wasted.
Yeah. And it's so funny as I think through this as a teacher and how much of this applies to my world in education. We try to do with this we try to do this with labs. So Mike, I don't remember the last time, or I don't know if you remember the last time you took a lab class, like a chemistry or a biology or something like that. So we'll come in and we'll try to have the students do some sort of an experiment, and where we're trying to get them to go, huh? I wonder why that's the case. And where we lose it, we 100% lose it, is the fact that they're really just trying to get the lab done. Like they have no idea what they're doing. So they're really just trying to do the mechanics of the lab, and they never make it to that like, like idea. And that's where we fall down as educators. In like, we can get them to the reveal, like, oh, that did turn blue, right? Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it did turn blue. But they never had the, I wonder why this isn't blue, right? Like kind of a thing. So it's just cool to see how this book like so directly applies to my world.
Yeah, and the term for that is gap theory, where gaps in our knowledge cause pain. It's like an itch that we need to scratch. And so the scenario that you're just talking about, you need to open up the gap, help people realize that there's something here you don't know, because people tend to think that they know a lot. And it's hard to use that gap theory when people believe that they know everything. But gap theory, I think this is a powerful idea for not just you in the classroom, but for me in internet marketing and even the stuff that I make. It's not necessarily, even marketing tends to have a little bit of a sleazy feel to it. I don't think it needs to be, but it can be. And so even just like the videos that I make, gap theory is relevant there. You know, if I want people to watch my YouTube videos, I have to have a hook. That's where gap theory comes in. I've got to open up the loop at the beginning to make them want to watch.
Well,
and this is just human psychology. It's not trying to trick anybody. It's not clickbait. I mean, one example of this is Pat Flynn, the deep pocket monster. You know, he has the packs that he opens. They start with the wrap pack because people want to know what's in there. There's the knowledge gap. What is that? What did you actually get when you bought this, sort of a thing? I think that's really valuable to understand.
What was the video that you were talking about making? It's like the 20 somethings. Help me.
Yeah, the quality of life tips, basically,
Yes.
just like quick little obsidian tips.
So
yeah.
my first thing, applying this directly to you, is I go, hey Mike, do you really have any quality of life tips that you can provide me? Do you know what I mean? Like, so you say that out there is like, there's 20 quality of life tips, and I go, do you really have? And like, that's the And then hopefully, like, the reason I'm watching this is that I can glean one or two of those off of you, and I go, aha, right? And it's like, so this directly applies to what we do every day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the hook for that video, just if you want to understand how I crafted this, it could definitely be stronger if there was a knowledge gap. I could definitely insert knowledge gap here, but just because this is the one I'm working on and we're talking about this book. Whether you're brand new to Obsidian or you've been using it for years, chances are there are features you haven't discovered yet. In this video, I'll share some of my favorite quality of life enhancements that can streamline your PKM workflows, boost your note-taking productivity. Could definitely be stronger. I'm not great at the hooks. You know, I prefer to just write the thing and put it out there. And a lot of people do that. You know, I'm going through the Creator Business Accelerator right now, and people are like, I just don't want to think about thumbnails and titles and hooks. And like, you have to.
But this book tells you why. Because it creates that, like, is this video going to tell me what I don't know, or what like the creator thinks they're going to tell me? And like, this gives credibility to that concept or that thing that isn't just the thumbnail or the title. It's actually a real thing that goes into it. So I like that.
And ultimately, the reason to do this is not because you want to manipulate someone and you want to get them to watch your video. It's because you want to serve them effectively and actually deliver on whatever promise you're going to make. You don't want to trick them accidentally.
I will
You
say,
don't want them to click on the video and be like, oh, this was a total waste of my time. I should have never done that.
I will say some people believe what you just said. Then there
Yeah.
are those other people who don't really care. They're like, really, I just don't care. Just hit that button. Like, I just want you to hit that button. I'll use any method necessary. And we don't watch those people after a little while. Once we realize they're doing that to us, we don't watch those people anymore.
They don't stick. They
Exactly.
don't have the longevity. And yeah, that's why. All right, ready to go to the next chapter?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the third chapter is concrete, and the big ideas here are to help people understand and remember, and then to help people coordinate. So when you have a concrete idea, basically the easiest way to define this, I think, is to explain what it's not. It's the opposite of being abstract.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Which is tough for me. I tend to be a bit of an abstract thinker and like, oh, well, it's kind of like this. And I talk about things that don't really exist. So I feel like maybe I have a lot of room to grow in this particular area. They talk about computing in context, where you take an existing schema and then you overlay a new layer of abstraction. That is the thing that I think, if I'm going to try to be more concrete, that's what I have to do. So one example of this that I can see right away that I could get better at is I've got these frameworks like the PKM Stack framework or the Creativity Flywheel framework. But when I explain those, I'm explaining them out of thin air. It would be great if I could anchor them in something that people already understood, and I haven't thought it through to that level yet. So got some work to do.
And I'm sorry if people get annoyed with the teaching examples here, but like this is 100% in my world where the lesson works so much better if I build off the prior day's lesson or the prior week's lesson or the thing you learned in that last class. And students will always come to me and will be like, oh, why do I have to take linear algebra before I take operations research? And I go, because if you don't take linear algebra and you don't understand the basics of like that kind of math, will make no sense to you. It's like I'm going to do magic, and I'm not doing magic. I'm doing linear algebra in an applied context. So it's like it's very, very true and valuable. I think one of the ideas that they brought in here is this idea of the Velcro, and like in good people, good teachers, good presenters of this kind of stuff, the more hooks you can create, the easier it is for me to layer that more abstract concept onto the more concrete ideas, right? So that more abstract concept on the more concrete ideas. And it's like, it just makes sense. Like when you've done this a bunch of times, or when you have to do this, it just makes sense. I can tell you that like my students absolutely hate it when I am not concrete. They hate it when I leave things in the abstract. They give an example here about the engineers talking to the machinists. And I'm trying to find where exactly it is. I seem to have lost it. But like basically it's the idea that engineers think abstractly and they think about design and drawings and blueprints, and machinists think, what do I need to do to keep the production line running, or to actually make the part? And this is why, we talk about diversity a lot. This is why having both of those people in the world and in the same meeting makes sense. I worked at a microphone manufacturer at one point in my life. And the hilarious thing is like, we would do things in the engineering space, and then we had this guy, and this guy was a master clock technician. So he was trained in Germany. I mean, he would put one of those little eyepieces in that has like the super magnification, and he'd work on things like half the size of your pinky nail. He was like down in there, like going into it, and we would come to him like with a design, or we would say like, hey, this is what we're thinking, and he'd come back and he'd be like, nope, don't do it. He's like, that's a bad idea. And we'd be like, why? And he'd go, you can't manufacture that. He's like, the guys on the line, there's no way they can do what you want them to do with any kind of quality. And then if we turn it up and we try to manufacture 1,000 of them or 1,000,000 of them or 100 million of them, he's like, no way, never going to happen. So we'd have to go back and rethink about the design. And it's like, it's just a really cool idea between abstraction and concrete, and the dance that goes on between those two things.
That's interesting. Which microphone manufacturer was it?
So Shure. I had an internship at Shure in Chicago. And like one of the coolest projects I worked on was basically, it was when the in-ear buds were first starting to come out, and they were basically only used by professional performing artists. So you were trying to make those smaller and smaller and smaller and make them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper so the consumer could buy them. Because Shure is a prosumer, kind of a place. They make professional gear and they make consumer gear. So we were trying to figure out how to make the drivers in them that would push the sound out.
Yep.
And that was a fun time. Fun summer.
Using Shure in-ear monitors
nice.
as we speak.
Those were the first ones I ever had that were actually good. And I got them because they had an old pair that had broken and they couldn't sell them anymore. And somebody walked up to me and threw them at me and he goes, "Hey, we fixed these. Here you go." And I was like, "Awesome." Yeah. So.
Very cool. One of the things that is relevant to what you were sharing there is that novices crave concreteness. They talk about in this chapter, but the key is, and experts tend to think more abstractly about things. So the difference between an expert and a novice is that ability to think abstractly. However, that doesn't mean that the expert or the teacher in this particular case should just dumb things down so that the novice can understand it. The way to do this is to find a universal language. That's challenging to me, but I really like that idea. And Blake with the dad joke in the chat, that sure sounds interesting.
Oh my gosh. Thanks, Blake.
All right. I don't really anything else from chapter
Nope.
3. Okay.
I'm good.
All right. So next chapter is chapter 4. This is credible. And the big ideas here are to help people believe. And there's a couple different ways you can do that with external credibility and with internal credibility. The things that I jotted down in my notes from this, though, were really just tactical things, I guess, like that minor points underneath that. So I don't know if you want to talk about internal or external credibility yet before we get into like 2 types of authorities and the Sinatra test and stuff.
Like this chapter, I don't want to say it was the weakest, but it was one of those ones where I was kind of like, okay, like fine, it's fine. It didn't stand out as much to as the other ones did to me.
Yeah, and that's the thing is with credible, I feel like this is sort of a checkbox where all of the other ones maybe are a sliding scale. This one is either do I believe this or do I not? Is it credible or isn't it? It's not like, well, this is 80% credible, so I guess, it'll stick.
That's a really
maybe
good
I'm
way.
wrong, but
no, that's a really good way to describe that. I would have never thought of it that way, but this is one of those ones that you have to have. But really, if you can get there, that's really all you have to do. Like you don't have to be like expert at it. Just get good enough and move on.
Yeah, and so there's lots of different ways that you can have credibility. The authorities are the thing that was interesting to me. Authorities are a reliable source of credibility for ideas. And then there's 2 types of authorities, experts and then celebrities or other aspirational figures, which is why you may have the world's leading expert in whatever talking about something, but you may also have Oprah recommending a book on her book club, and that has more sway than the expert.
Okay. Pause. Can we talk about why this is true? Like, I don't want to take us too far.
Sure.
But this makes absolutely no sense to me. Okay, if let's use an NBA player. An NBA player, if they're going to recommend basketball shoes to me, they are an expert at evaluating basketball shoes. So therefore, go tell me about those basketball shoes. Fantastic, right? I love that. But if they're going to recommend to me, I don't know, a t-shirt, everybody wears t-shirts. You're not special. What do you know about t-shirts, right? So then I turn this on and I say, Cory, think about this. Is this what you and Mike do, right? Do you consider yourselves experts at these
Are we
books?
part of the problem?
We're what I'll say, I'll speak for me because I don't want to back you into a corner. I'm definitely not a celebrity, right? 100% not a celebrity. Okay, cool. So therefore, would that mean I have some expertise at evaluating books and recommending them to other people? Or do I have nothing of that? And I just am a guy who's willing to talk for an hour and a half to 2 hours on a microphone about books. Do you know what I mean? But I think about this and I'm like, why are we so, as humans, why are we so crazy that we let people who can sing really, really well tell us about bacon and sliced meat or whatever? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not saying I don't fall for it. I'm just saying it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, okay. So
okay.
I think later on in the book, they talk about how we tend to make decisions based on what would be best for our group. And so basically, I think this is the beginnings of wanting to identify with a particular group.
Oh, that actually makes a lot of sense.
So I may not be able to dunk from the free throw line or dunk at all, but I want to be like Mike, so I'm going to drink Gatorade.
Okay.
And yeah, I guess if we think about it, we know, well, he's being paid a lot of money to do that. He probably doesn't even like it, doesn't drink it outside of the ad spots maybe, but in the moment we have trouble disconnecting that. But I do think that there is something about just in it, take out the advertising piece, because I think the examples we're focusing on here are very much the far end of the scale, like the tip of the spear, right? And there are a lot of people. I mean, we literally at the beginning of this episode talked about sponsor games, right? We want to sell sponsorships. We're not going to take sponsorships for things we don't like or don't use. Having gone through Sponsor Magnet and understanding that if we're going to recommend something to people, we want to put an honest stamp of approval on it. I think that's more relevant for a lot of people, but there are a lot of people who will look at, and I don't consider myself a celebrity to answer your question, but I do think that if I think about it, I do influence people in specific ways.
Yes, you do.
Hopefully to use Obsidian.
Yes, you do.
So I think there's different levels of celebrity or aspirational figures or even experts. What makes somebody an expert? If you're looking for somebody who is a productivity expert, I'm definitely not that. If you're looking for somebody who's even an Obsidian expert, I'd argue I'm probably not that. There are bigger names, Nick Milo, for example, who have been doing this longer and know Obsidian better than I do. If you're looking for values-based productivity principles executed through Obsidian workflows, now I'm probably the expert because we've niched down far enough. And that's one of the things that I teach people in the Creator Business Accelerator is if you niche down far enough, you are an expert at something.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to hear about this, to think about, experts, celebrities, aspirational figures and be like, oh, well, that's, the elite 0.1% of people in the world. I'll never, ever be that. You're a celebrity to somebody. You're an expert to somebody for some specific thing. You have some sort of expertise there. So I don't think this is just, well, I should borrow credibility when I want to talk about these things. No, talk about the stuff that talk about it in a way that would have been helpful to you from 2 years ago. The curse of knowledge, right? We think that what we know is just obvious to everybody, but it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
There are things that you are in your brain that can be helpful to somebody. So I think that's worth thinking about. And then the other thing I want to mention about the borrowed credibility, I think the argument could be made that we are complete posers here because we're talking about these ideas from these books from people who have actually written the books and put in a lot more work than we ever have. How easy is it to just show up and talk about, well, I like this one, I don't like that one.
Yep.
The thing that gives us credibility, I would argue, and makes us an expert in some way, shape, or form is that we have done this a lot. We have read a lot of these books. So there is expertise that comes along from that perspective. When I started doing this 200 something episodes ago, I had no idea really what a good book looked like. I know exactly what a good nonfiction book looks like now. And that is helping me as I'm writing my own nonfiction book. Yep. And until you have a tipping point event like that, you kind of don't even recognize how much skill or expertise you've developed.
Yeah, in tying back to their stuff, you're taking the abstraction of your book and putting it on the concrete schema of the fact that you have this idea of what good nonfiction books looks like. So yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. So the only other thing that I think from this chapter, and we'll hit it real quick, is this idea of the Sinatra test, which I thought was pretty clever, and I had never heard of it before, so I want to say it here. It's the idea, it's like, if I can make it in this environment, or if I can do this thing in this context, I can do it anywhere. And the reason why I like this so much is because this is 100% true. if I can, yada, 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 then I can definitely whatever. And it's like, this is 100% a true phenomenon that I will, agree to and acknowledge. Like, if you can do that, you can do pretty much anything in that same context. So I'm in for that.
Nice. Yeah, I like that too. The other thing, well, two other things, three other things.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Because I'm going up from the Sinatra test in my mind map, and I realize that there are a couple things here which are relevant to what we talked about. So the first thing in my notes, we trust the recommendation of people whom we want to be like. That encapsulates the idea we were talking about previously. So credit to Chip and Dan Heath. They said it much more succinctly than I did. They also talk about vivid details tend to boost credibility.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking to add credibility to your idea, one easy way to do it is just to get more and more specific, which is sort of a different way of explaining what I was talking about, where if you niche down far enough, everybody's an expert in something. The other one, this is the one I was going to share.
Okay.
Statistics. I like to use statistics. I like to use numbers. They should almost always be used to illustrate a relationship. That's challenging to me. And again, I don't have an action item associated with this. In fact, I don't know that I have any action items, because really it's just get better at developing and communicating your ideas.
get better at success.
Yeah. But this is something that I want to consider, is like, how do I use these statistics and these numbers in communicating my ideas? Because a lot of times, like, oh, that sounds cool. It sort of supports this idea, but I'm not real clear on, well, this is how it communicates this relationship between things. So
Yep, I'm ready to move to emotional.
All right, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so chapter 5 is emotional. Basically, it's this idea that we are more effective in making ideas that stick if we can attach to some sort of human emotion. If we can attract our idea, if we can get people to believe in something, or if we can like pull on the heartstrings a little bit or push these emotional buttons, that way they kind of connect or resonate with the idea that we want to get out of here. So they are good about saying, like, don't do it for the sake of doing it. Try to find an actual, like, tangible emotional connection to people. That way they'll bind to what you're trying to tell them. And the funny thing about it is, one of the examples they use, this guy named John Caples, but they actually kind of like say, he's ruthless in the way he does it, right? Like, so he does it well. He's like really effective at doing it, but like he's kind of like, I don't want to say over the top. Mike, help me with if I'm saying my words wrong. He's really effective at doing it, but he also is really aggressive at it. If that's the best way I can describe it.
So he's kind of a marketing guy, and the way that he describes it in terms of the direct mail marketing, I think is the way that they mention it. It's like the stuff that shows up in your mailbox, and you got to have a single sentence or to get someone to open it instead of just throwing it in the trash.
Yep.
And there is a little bit of there's a little bit of negative connotation with that, which I think is where you get the idea of like being over the top. That's kind of where clickbait comes from. But again, like, I think the principles that he's talking about, they can be used for good or evil. And he even kind of talks about that a little bit later, how there's certain things like he's uncomfortable using these principles, sort of the same idea behind, I would say, Influence by Robert Cialdini, or 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Like, these are legit principles. These things work, but you got to be careful how you use them. And what's interesting in the context of this chapter is right away, direct response mail campaigns, people are like, ew, no, I'm not going to touch that with a 39.5-foot pole. And he's like, no, that's fine. But later on, I'll draw the line.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a little bit relative. You got to figure out where you're gonna draw that line. But.
Yep. So then they immediately go to, or immediately is a funny word, but they tie this to the idea of, if you want people to be emotionally attached, you need them to get to think about what's it for me? Like, what does this mean for
Yep.
me? How does this hit me? So they talk about this, they call it WIFI, right? Like this idea of what's in it for you, right? So it's an acronym, but what's in it for you. And they say if you want to get people to care about something, you have to like make it relevant to them, or you have to get them to care about it. So this whole concept comes in, when we get to emotional, it isn't like make them cry and everything, right? It's much more about make them care about it in a way that makes sense for them to care about it. So like I'm pulling for an example, and I didn't write any like dramatic or direct examples down. So Mike, if you have a good example that they gave in the book, like I'd love that. But it's this idea of like the thing that makes it turn back onto you and go, oh yeah, like I would care about that a lot. So that's kind of the nature of emotion. That's at least that's what I got out
Sure.
from a high level standpoint.
Well, there is one story that stands out to me, and that's when they were trying to get the firemen to
Yeah.
watch the safety video, and they're like, "Yeah, sure, we'll watch it." And then they tried to incentivize it more by giving them a free popcorn popper or something, and they got upset because not because it was detrimental to them as individuals. They would get something that they would not have gotten otherwise. Like they come out better in this deal, but the whole idea that a fireman, the group that they belong to, would be influenced by something like this, they found repulsive.
Mm-hmm.
So what's in it for you isn't just what's in it for me as the individual and how do I get more so that other people don't, but really it's how does my group succeed. This is kind of the chapter that comes from. But the other thing, talking about what's in it for you, this is where they talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yep.
And how that hierarchical view of Maslow's pyramid is actually bogus. You don't go from one to the next to the next to the next, and then finally you get to the one at the top. They're you can appeal to multiple needs at the same time. You don't have to go in that specific order, which I think is interesting.
Related to Maslow, they give a good example of basically the difference in you thinking for yourself and then you projecting onto other people, which I think we do this a lot more than we realize we do it. It's like, oh, if I'm making the decision, I'm making it for the following reasons. If Mike's making the decision, he's making it for different reasons than I would. But then if you asked Mike would say the exact same thing. Like he's making it for the same reason I am, but he would think I'm making it for that other reason. And they give some examples of that as well.
I have a different way of framing that, which is that we judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions.
Yep. Absolutely.
There's some other interesting stuff in here. Semantic stretches when people overuse a word. The word that they kind of highlighted was unique, but when I think about that, I feel like the business world is very, very guilty of this. Priority is probably another one. There's really only one priority. It literally means the first or prior thing. And so you have people who are like, I have these 10 different priorities for today. Like, no, that's not what it means.
Yeah, you don't.
And then at the very beginning, there's a story of Mother Teresa, which I think is really powerful. If you're going to try to use this to make an idea sticky, I think this is where the takeaway is. Mother Teresa said, if I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. So when you are trying to compel people to do something, or you're trying to communicate an idea in a way that it sticks, the way to do that is to make it emotional. And the key here for me from this section is that people don't think analytically and emotionally. They say it this way: when people think analytically, they're less likely to think emotionally. And they shared the examples of the people who were trying to raise funds for like starving children, and they gave people $5, and they measured the average amount that people paid. When they first heard the statistics about how great the need was, those people who received that, on average, they donated like $1.43.
Yeah.
And the people who got the story about a specific kid who was struggling, they donated $2 and something. But what was interesting was when they combined those two, they shared the numbers and the personal story, it basically lined up with the first group, the $1 something group. And so the numbers I kind of think are irrelevant, but it was interesting that it's like, just because you have an emotional plea in something doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have the effect that you want it to have. And as an analytical thinker, my kind of by default, I got to check myself when I'm communicating ideas, I think.
This makes me think of do you know the Sarah McLachlan commercial where she's singing in the background "Arms of an Angel" and there's all the like dogs and stuff like that, right? Direct appeal to emotion, 100% appeal to emotion. And I watch that and think, like, I'm sorry, forgive me if anybody thinks I'm completely cold-hearted, but like I watch that and I think, like, I mean, like, that's a really sad song, and there's dogs and cats and stuff, and it's like I have no pull to like donate to the ASPCA or whatever that's even for. Sorry, I don't know why I went on that tangent, but I don't remember if this is where they tell the story for the first time or if they tie back into it, because they'll tie back into like stories they've told in the past. The Floyd Lee story, where he is the dining coordinator for the one food service provider in the military. In Baghdad.
Yeah.
Like, I love the connection to this, where he says, I'm not just in charge of food service, I'm in charge of morale. And I think it ties directly into that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where he's saying, like, hey, guess what? I'm not just providing food for people. Like that's a lower need. What I'm really doing is I'm giving them an escape from this absolute chaos that they're living in. And when they come here, they have the ability to forget about that for a little while. And I think in that context, it makes me think about, like, okay, what am I doing? Like, in education, like, am I giving you the knowledge or just communicating information to you? Or am I helping you become somebody that you want to be in the future? And those are two very different ways to think about education. Because, like, if I just think about it as, like, I'm going to come in and, like, we're just going to turn this crank and I'm just going to teach you the skills and, like, the raw materials that you need, blah, blah, blah. Or it's like, I'm inspiring you to go do cool things in the world. And I'm inspiring you to get that job that you want to get. And I'm inspiring you to, add value in the following ways. I really like that framing of what's my target as I try to communicate to the group that I care about, or that I try to communicate to the individual I care about. And I thought that was a really compelling story for me, a sticky story for me, as I think through how to influence others.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was this chapter, but the concept of stories is the next chapter. So you ready to go there?
Yeah, I am ready to go there. Yep.
Okay, so the last official chapter in the book, chapter 6, is stories, and this is basically the being able to tell a story. It's an effective teaching tool. And again, there are whole books that have been written on this, but I think that this is a great way to end the book. I feel like when you make things simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, and emotional, and then just like communicate them that way, it really does have limited effectiveness if there isn't a story attached to it. So kind of at the heart of this is this idea, just based in human psychology, that we really love story. Stories provide both stimulation and inspiration. They talk about, they mention that when friends tell us stories, we instinctively empathize. And then they get into kind of why this is the case, and that when you imagine an event, it stimulates the same brain regions as actually having the physical, going through the physical activity. They talk a little bit about mental practice, which kind of ties back to mental rehearsal, visualization. They kind of use those terms interchangeably. I don't think they are interchangeable, but I've mentioned on the podcast before, I think the kind of the research that has gone into this that I'm familiar with the family business. Do you remember me talking about this, or should I briefly? Okay. Yeah. I guess just real briefly, like the one study that comes to mind, I think it's a University of Chicago study where they had groups of basketball players, and one practice free throws for an hour a day, and they improved by a certain percentage. There was another group that visualized shooting free throws every day but didn't touch a basketball, and then there was another group that didn't do anything. The one that didn't do anything, obviously they didn't get any better. The one that practiced free throws, it was like 18% or something like that, and it was like 1% less for the group that just visualized it. And free throws are a very mental thing. Like, there's not a lot of basketball players have the mental dexterity and skill that is required to shoot a free throw properly. So that maybe is cherry picking an example. They mentioned that mental practice alone provides about 2/3 of the value of physical practice. And I think that's probably pretty accurate. And so it doesn't mean that you don't need to do the physical practice, but I think the takeaway here is that you should augment that with the mental practice. And as it pertains to this chapter on stories, you got to be able to paint that picture for people. You have to help them visualize themselves doing the thing they want to do. If you can't do that, you're not going to convince anybody to follow you. So this isn't just a sales thing. In fact, for the family business, there's an emotional intelligence assessment where one of the scales is defined as sales orientation, and people always bristle at that. Really what it is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people, who are like, I don't want to be salesy. Like, well, are you married? Well, you sold yourself at least once.
Yep. Yeah. I think they framed this chapter in a very interesting way, and I can't tell if I like it or not. So the framing that they gave to it was simulation. Right. And they define simulation as knowledge about how to act. Right. So they say that stories are simulation, knowledge about how to act. And then they're also motivations or inspiration or motivation to act. Later on, they say the story is part entertainment and part instruction. I agree with the premise behind what they're doing. It's their not overuse, but it's their continual use of the word simulation. I just that rubs me the wrong way. Like, I don't know if it's the right word. I'm not going to tell you that I think it's the wrong word. I just don't know if it's like the best word or the word I would have used. They're consistent with it. So like they come back in here and they'll talk about like the simulation is basically you're running it through your head instead of actually doing it. So shooting free throws would be a good example. I'm doing everything mentally that I would do physically to shoot a free throw. I'm just doing it in my mind. I also think about, I've always, like, I don't know if it was in movies or where I saw it, but like somebody running the bobsled route, before they actually run the bobsled route. So like they mentally memorize it and they know exactly what they're going to do. The Blue Angels, there's a video somewhere where they run that mentally, like everything they're going to do. And they sit in a room around like a conference table and they've got their eyes closed and they're all doing it based on like timing. So essentially they've memorized exactly everything they're going to do to where they're almost reacting more when they get into the physical world than they are actually like actively thinking about how to do it. Mm-hmm. And there's just something about this that like I would need to put a lot more time in thinking about it. Something about simulation just seems wrong to me. It seems like the wrong word to use in this situation. And I mean, I'm not gonna beat it up, but at the same time, it just seems like the wrong word. I like when they get to the end. They also talk about like the different like story plots.
There's three of them.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Like the way they do it. They talk about Aristotle. There's four primary dramatic plots. And they go through those. McKee tells you these other plots and things like that. I agree with what you said at the very beginning. There are other people who do this for the entire book, and that is a much better and much more thorough thing if you want to just learn about storytelling. But I think they do a decent job, like saying, hey, this is important in making ideas sticky. You got to be able to tell a good story. Here are some tips and tricks and some basic ideas. Now go launch. So overall didn't have an issue. Like I like the chapter. That idea of simulation just for some reason doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I think why it's there, but I also sort of wish it wasn't. It feels like a tangential topic, which maybe isn't necessary. Like the whole mental practice idea. When they started talking about imagining events, that's where my mind went. I'm like, are they going to go there? And then it's like, oh, they went there. But then, like you said, it's kind of like, well, why does that matter? You're talking about the simulation and like the examples of the elite of the elite. Not everybody is a Blue Angel pilot. Not everybody is the bobsledders. The picture I get for that, by the way, is the Cool Runnings where they're in the bathtub and they're doing the turns.
Yeah, me too. Maybe that's where I got it too. Yeah.
But another example of this, which is pretty famous, is Michael Phelps, where he visualizes the race. And there's a famous story about how he's up on the platform. He's visualizing himself going through every single stroke. And his coach, even before, as he gets up on the platform, he yells out, "Put in the videotape," and that's his cue to play through what's going to happen in the race. And then I think it's the China Beijing Olympics where he had that last stride at the end, and he held his arm out just a little bit longer instead of taking another stroke, and he ends up winning by 100th of a second. And then they ask him, and that race, actually his goggles broke, so he's swimming blind. And they ask him afterwards, "What did it feel like?" And he's like, "Exactly like I thought it would." Because he had just done it so much that nothing could shake him off of that. That's not most people most of the time.
Well, so I think about this on a more tangible thing. Like, you're gonna tell me a story and like try to do something sticky with one of your videos. Like, I gotta tell you, Mike, like, I'm not visualizing myself doing something in Obsidian. And, like, it just doesn't connect. Like, there's something, I'm not simulating that Obsidian thing or that knowledge management thing. It just doesn't, I don't know. There's something that breaks down here for me.
So that's where, like, it's almost, why is this in here? Because I agree that that's important in the beginning of the story, or beginning of the video, or beginning of the course, or beginning of the book. You want to paint this picture and communicate the end state for the person. This is the transformation that's going to happen, why you should stick with me as we go through this journey together. But the simulation and the mental practice there has zero impact on that application.
I agree. Yeah. I agree.
So it's sort of like a tangential thing, and maybe we drifted a little bit too far. I think you could make the argument that they really didn't, but I agree that it just didn't fit quite as nicely as all the other stuff.
Yeah. Let's go to the epilogue.
Okay. So the epilogue is what sticks minus the question mark. And this is kind of where they take these 6 different things that they've talked about in these different chapters, and then they make a checklist, basically, that you can use to decide whether this is going to be a sticky idea. But it's not just, is it simple? Is it unexpected? They reframe it a little bit, and they only include 5 of them. So the first one, simple, is basically assumed that you do have the core of an idea. So then what do you need people to do once you have that core idea? How do you communicate it in a way that is sticky? And this, I think, is pretty genius. So first, it must make the audience pay attention. That's where the unexpected piece comes in. They have to understand it, remember it. That's where concrete comes in. They need to agree or believe. That's where credible comes in. They have to care. So that's where emotional comes in. And they have to be able to act on it. That's where the story comes in, which I guess that's something we didn't really talk about with story. So in this context, a good story is not, David Goggins can't hurt me, the radical transformation, because most people are not going to be able to act on that sort of story.
Exactly.
It may be inspirational, may be entertaining. You get done and you're like, well, that guy's crazy. I'm not going to do that.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be, I see how this idea can actually benefit my life, and there's a clear way to apply this so I can get that desired result.
Yeah, I like that they were intellectually honest here, because they throw out those 5, the pay attention, understand, and remember, agree and believe, care, be able to act on it. They throw out those 5 and they say, hey, we could have written the book this way, right? Like we definitely could have structured the book this way, and these could have been our 5 chapters, and it would have been a good book, and everything was great. But we thought about it this other way, and we just decided to form it that way. And I like when authors do that. Like they say, hey, we're going to make this connection here. It's going to be a good connection. You might ask yourself, why didn't you just write the book that way? We could have, and we didn't. So I think, and especially at the end, after they've established everything, after kind of they've given us their entire framework, they then give us another version of the framework, because I think what they're actually doing is they're actually practicing what they preached in the earlier part. They're making it more concrete. Oh, unexpected, pay attention. Like, they're giving us another framework to like attach onto, or another schema to attach onto. And I really like the way they did that. I don't know if are we going to do the next section on its own, or are we stopping here? No. Okay. So
I think we probably will stop here. I mean, the next section I've sort of sprinkled in stuff throughout, but it's the reference guide.
Yeah. Which I think when you attach the epilogue and the reference guide as a way to end this book, man, I think it's a killer way to end the book. Like it actually just
Yes.
makes it like it ties a very, very, very effective bow on their framework, and it ties a very, very effective bow on the story that they're telling. So I really liked, kind of how they wrap this up in the epilogue. Might be one of the most effective epilogues, and then with that reference section that I've read in a book. Like it was really well done.
Okay, you just gave me an action item. I'll get to
Okay.
that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that this is a great way to end it. And then just they hit on a couple other things that they've mentioned in the book, but I think it's the way that they highlight them again adds more weight to the argument. Focus on the message, not the presentation. They actually share here that there's almost no correlation between speaking talent and the ability to make an idea stick. And then they also mention the difference between idea spotting and idea creating. They mentioned this in a previous chapter. We just didn't get to it. But they call out here that great idea spotters always trump great idea creators. There's more great ideas out there already than you are able to make on your own. So that's the thing for me is I want to become better at recognizing those things. I feel like that's kind of the basis of the creativity flywheel. So I'm sort of there already, but good highlight or reminder at the end of the book here.
I'm really glad you brought that one up because when I was reading this, I wanted to talk about that and I completely blanked on it right now. So that spotter versus creator thing, and it's by no means a get out of jail free. Like you don't have to create anything, but it's much more of if you're not the kind of person who like is going to be that creator, like just try to be a spotter. And I think that's what they've done. And they showed the example of it. We spotted this story. We grabbed it because it tells our point well. We spotted this story. We grabbed it and it tells our story well. So I really like that too.
All right. Action items?
I don't have any, Mike. I don't know if that's just the nature of I told you I was flying too close to the sun, right? And like my week is just my week is just my week, or if it's the fact that I just am struggling to get to the action items. I don't really have any. I know that I'm not going to commit to this as an action item, but like I know that the ideas in this book are things I want to act on. I don't know if I want to commit to saying like in this venue I'm going to try to do XYZ or whatever it might be. I think the easiest action item I can say is I want to take their reference guide and I want to have that more accessible than it being in the end of this book where I have to go find it. So like somehow I will commit to the action item of I want to go get that reference guide and I want to put it in a more accessible form for me. That way when I go like, oh, what did Dan and Chip say about this idea? Boom, I can go to the reference guide and have that more available. So that's the one I'll commit to for right now.
All right. Well, the reference guide, I didn't know we were actually going to talk about that in the show itself. But as you were talking through it and you were mentioning how nice it is to have that and even your action item of making that more accessible, my action item is to add an easy reference guide to my book on personal retreats.
Very cool. That's a great action item. Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree that the format of the book really isn't tactical in terms of I'm going to go apply this tomorrow. It's more helping you make a mindset shift, I feel. And there probably is specific action items regarding I'm going to use the checklist during my next teaching session or the next newsletter that I write or something like that. They did give a lot of those examples inside of what'd you call them? Clinics?
Yeah, clinics. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the gray boxes where they look at two different versions of a message and how one is better than the other. But I guess the thing about communicating ideas in a way that makes them stick is you just have to communicate ideas over and over and over again. And as you do it and you have this reference, I feel like over time they're naturally going to get more sticky and you're naturally going to get better at communicating them. And that really is the goal of this book. It's not, well, get 1 million people to do a personal retreat or something. It's really just, you're talking about ideas anyways. You want people to remember them more. So here's some stuff that may help you do that.
Yep.
All right. Style and rating. So my book, I'll go first. This is the prototypical Dan and Chip Heath book. So if you have read any of the other ones, Decisive, I think, is the one that we covered for Bookworm. That one was really good. This is very much like that. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but co-authored books I'm generally not a fan of. However, Chip and Dan do a great job of co-writing. They both bring different expertise, but it doesn't have that disjointed jumping back and forth between different people. And even if co-authored books don't say like, this is me and I'm saying this, and this is the other person and they're saying that, just the tone is different. It feels like somebody else is speaking, but when it's not explicitly communicated, you're kind of wondering who is actually saying this. So I'm generally not a fan of these. I think Chip and Dan Heath books are the exception. I also think that what they're really, really good at is taking a simple concept and, for the most part, sticking to it very well. I think we talked a little bit about how the mental rehearsal, the visualization, the simulation stuff maybe drifted a little bit further than everything else being so applicable, and it's a direct connection between this is how I apply this as an independent creator, this is how I apply this for you, Cory, as a teacher. Like, there's a very clear path forward. It's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. This is definitely going to help me in the next class that I present. They do a phenomenal job of that. That they write maybe some of the most generalizable productivity / business type books that you will ever come across. It's almost the exact opposite framing of the previous book that we read, where you go into it like, well, unless I'm a creator who's trying to get sponsors, I'm not sure there's anything in there. And spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to that episode, it was a golden book. We both gave it 5 stars. I was worried that you weren't going to, so definitely go read that one. The takeaway from that was, yeah, there is a lot of stuff in here that I can apply. But this one, from the very beginning, they have this way of, they didn't know that I was fill in the blank in terms of occupation, but they wrote this book specifically for me in my occupation or vocation or whatever. I don't know how they do it. It's really, really good. They are phenomenal storytellers right from the very beginning with the kidney heist. I mean, there are so many powerful stories in here, which generally people try to tell powerful stories when they are writing a book, right? But it's goes together with this topic like peanut butter and jelly. If there was ever a book where storytelling would have been critical, like it's this one. So in one sense, it's a little bit familiar because it seems like everybody's doing that now. This book was written a little bit ago. I don't remember the exact published date, but it's not a brand new.
I think it was 2017. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, 2007. Sorry, 2007.
Yeah, so almost 20 years old. There's some things in there where they talk about things. I'm like, oh, well, iPhones aren't a thing yet and whatever. So it maybe is a little bit dated. I don't know. I think the doesn't degrade the quality of the arguments or the ideas that they're talking about here. I think this is a 5-star book. It's hard for me to justify that when I had 0 action items from it. I think that's okay, though. I think there are perspective shifting books where you can look back several years from now and be like, yeah, that one really changed the way I do things. You may not be able to specifically call out the ways that it has changed things. It's hard to point out the specific points in my workflows that this is going to influence, but my guess is that its fingerprints are going to be all over everything that I make for years to come. So I'm going to rate this a 5-star book.
Okay. So it's my turn. I will not rate it a 5-star book. I'll tell you that right now. But I'm going to temper my rating. So this book is incredibly valuable when it comes to thinking about communicating in a way that people will remember what you say. So they call it made to stick, right? So thinking about communicating effectively and in a way that people will carry on or remember the things you say or use those later. I think the book itself is a great model of that. I think they did that really, really well. The success framework, it's going to stick. I'm going to be able to remember those things. I'm going to be able to remember, kind of the core ideas throughout this book. Some of the stories they tell, I think are going to stick. So very, very effective in that. Mike, where like I think we've done a good job at extolling the virtues of this book and like saying the good things about it. So I'm just going to focus on the reason why it's not a five-star book for me. There were too many stories. Like I think at times they made their point and then they just kept going. And I was like, guys, you don't need another 15 pages of stories. You made a really effective point and we're good and I don't need it anymore. If they would have taken those and added them to an appendix and say, for another example of this, see the story we give in Appendix B, right? And that would be great, like absolutely great. The clinics, I did not find that much value in. I thought they were okay. I didn't think they were great. Now maybe that's just me. Maybe I just like didn't resonate with what the clinics were. But I got to the point where towards the end I just started skipping through the clinic because I was like, yeah, okay, I know what you're gonna do. Right? You're gonna give me two scenarios. You're gonna then evaluate those based on the thing, and it just wasn't that necessary for me for what I was trying to get out of the book or the point of the book. So like when you put those two ideas together, like I think that's what drops it down from a 5-star book for me. Other people might read this and they might love it. They may be like, I am so glad they included the clinics. I couldn't have, done this book without the clinics. Or, man, I wish they would have given me more stories. I just disagree with that. Like, I think they made their point. They didn't need to go on further with the point. So you had said about you thought it was a good length, right, with the book. And this is why I love doing the show, because sometimes we completely agree and sometimes we don't. I think we could have knocked probably a solid 50 pages off of this book, and I would have given it a 5-star rating. Like if it had just shortened down, and it's not because what they said was bad, or like not even, I don't even want to say it's not because what they said was irrelevant. I just don't think they needed to go on as long. So I'm not going to drop it very far. I'm going to do something that we don't often do, but I'm just going to knock this to a 4.5-star book. Only because I think if you'd have dropped 50 pages of it off, it's a more accessible book to audiences, and it gets your point across just as well. I wouldn't get rid of the reference guide at all. I wouldn't change the framework. I think the framework was good. Like there was very little about the core content of this book that I would have changed. Just I think you could have done it in a more concise way. So I guess thinking about it now as we process out loud when we talk, I think they could have made it a little more simple or a little more compact. And if they'd have done that, it's a higher rated book for me.
That is fair. So I was flipping through the introduction to see if I could find it because I agree with you. However, I think one comment that I'm not sure I can find, and then a piece of advice for people if they're going to pick this one up. I thought they said, but I cannot find, the clinics are basically optional.
They 100% did that, which allowed me to go, okay, like after I read the first couple of them, I was like, I'm done. Like I know what they're going to do in the clinics. I'm good. Like I don't need to do those anymore. And it's because they said that. They absolutely did say that.
Yes. Okay, cool. So I'm not making that up. So that the piece of advice that I would give people then is like, I'm glad that the clinics are there. However, I also feel like you do not need to read all those. So if you want to instantly make the book about 50 pages shorter, just skip the clinics.
If they would have said what they said, given us the first clinic, and then taken the rest of the clinics and said they're in the appendix, and they would have referred to it. Like, if you want a clinic about this, refer to Appendix B.
Okay.
That makes it a stronger book to me, right? Like, because now you're not putting in the middle of the text as I read through it. It wasn't that hard for me. I mean, the only way to read is electronically. So therefore, it wasn't that hard for me to scroll. It wasn't that hard for me to scroll through it. And it wouldn't be that hard to turn the pages. It just brought the rating down for me. That's all.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I understand that. Yeah, it was easy for me to look past that. And I do think that the practical examples of those are great. I do think you're right that putting them in the end might be a different way to do it. But I didn't mind it.
Yeah, I do think, though, before we end this section, I do think this is a very good read when you think about communication and when you think about transferring ideas to other people. I think it's a very, very strong read. So I would highly recommend people, no matter what you do, read this book.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Is this is definitely one that we would both recommend people read.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's put Made to Stick on the shelf. What's next, Cory?
All right, the next book finishes out the Ryan Holiday Stoic series. It is Wisdom Takes Work, Learn, Apply, Repeat. It is his Stoic Virtue series, and according to Ryan Holiday, this is the last one in there. This is the, Mike, if I'm remembering, the fourth of 4 books in this series.
Yeah, I mean there are only 4 Stoic virtues, so this has to be the
Okay,
end.
I didn't know that. So okay, you just taught me that there's only 4 Stoic virtues. So it basically came out like a week ago. I don't even know, as of when we're recording this podcast, it came out about a week ago. And it's already ranked, number 1 new release. So it's getting the popularity that, Ryan Holiday has kind of built for himself as we go through this. I'm excited to read this one. I've kind of had mixed feelings on the past Stoic Virtues book, so I'm very intrigued to see what I think of this one. I'm saying that as a way to say I do not expect this to be a 5-star book for me when we're done reading that. But I like the idea of these. I'm not necessarily a Stoicism person, but I think there's some truth to glean out of these things. And then I think Ryan Holiday writes some interesting stuff, and I like reading his stuff. So we're gonna read the last of the Stoic Virtues books from Ryan Holiday, Wisdom Takes Work. Mike, after that, what's coming up?
After that is a book that I am both very excited about, but now actually fairly nervous about.
Okay.
That is Toxic Grit by Amanda Getz. I heard Amanda speak at Craft and Commerce. I met her. She's a very smart, very accomplished person. And this book, the subtitle is How to Have It All and Actually Love What You Have. I feel like the core message of this is going to be great. However, let me read the first 2 sentences of the Amazon description to you. Burnout is an epidemic caused by a society that praises toxic grit. All good so far. Women have been taught to chase goals and to hold everything together while quietly falling apart. So we are not women. But I think that is okay because a lot of the productivity books that we read are written by bro culture dudes. Let's just call it what it is, right? So I think this is going to be a very different tone, which I think will be very refreshing and is worth shining a light on, even if it's not written to us specifically. May make the conversation a little bit interesting, but
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I don't like that. Doesn't worry me at all, right? I think, it's going to be a fun story or a fun conversation.
Yep. All right. Got any Gap books?
No. Yes. Okay. I don't remember if this was a Gap book last time or not, but I am working through God's Kingdom through God's Covenants. So that is my Gap book for right now, and it's basically a book on what's called progressive covenantalism, which is how the covenants unfold throughout the Bible. So that is my Gap book that I am working through right now. How about you?
No.
No.
No Gap books this time. Maybe I'll have one by next time. But Wisdom Takes Work looks like a little bit longer book. It came not too long ago. If it's like a lot of the other Ryan Holiday books, it's probably a bunch of short little chapters. I haven't cracked it open yet. So it probably looks longer than it will actually read. And maybe I'll have time to squeeze another one in. But I have survived this week. That was my only objective.
That was your only objective. Just so everybody knows, in our note taking app, I put no ... because that's the way Mike said that, right? No.
Yes, that is how I said it. All right. So thank you for listening. If you want to support the show, a couple ways you can do that. Number one, you can come hang out with us on the live stream. We made these open to everybody now. And we've had a couple people who've been pretty active in the chat today. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Blake. If you want to come hang out with us and live, you can do that. Go to youtube.com. Is it Bookworm FM? Is that our channel?
I believe so. youtube.com/bookwormfm. Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. So there you'll find the links to the upcoming live streams. And as long as I don't have to push them because life gets crazy, that's when they'll be. Another way you can support the show is by contributing to us monetarily by joining the pro members. We've got a pro show where we've got a longer ad-free version of the show. We don't have a ton of ads. That's going to change once Cory and I go to sponsor games.
That's
However,
right. That's right.
and we do a separate section of the show every week for the pro members. So today we talked about my trip to the Pinball Museum in Chattanooga. And you also get a bootleg, which gets uploaded right after we record. So in addition to the longer ad-free show, you can also get the show about a week or two early, depending on when we actually get around to recording these. There's also a Bookworm wallpaper, which is a 4K wallpaper with the Bookworm logo. It looks awesome. And you can become a Bookworm Pro supporter by going to patreon.com/bookwormfm. It is $7 a month, and it helps us keep the lights on, helps us keep doing the show, pays for our books. So thank you to everybody who has become a member. And if you want to become a Bookworm Pro member yourself, patreon.com/bookwormfm.
If you're reading along with us, pick up Wisdom Takes Work by Ryan Holiday, and we will talk to you next time.